Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smaulgld subscriber series where Smaulgld subscribers sound off. Today we have with us a returning guest, Erik the Red from Viking Analytics. Erik, how you doing today?
Doing great, Lewis. Great to chat with you again.
All right, great to have you. Erik, can you just give our listeners a quick preview of your service that you're offering, and then that's going to tie into what we're going to talk today, which is philosophy of investing and looking at some of the preconceived notions we all have and how that may, to our detriment, influence our investments.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this last time, but just as a review, I was been an entrepreneur for like 15 or 20 years. I've started a couple different businesses, and most recently, I had started a biofuels company and worked with that for about 10 years. We sold that in 2015. And since 2015, I've been kind of a student of the markets and got interested in gold, and now I have a service on Seeking Alpha. I write free articles for the general public and also have a subscription service. Just launched that in June. And in that service, I cover 8 energy companies in depth with all of the fundamentals and earnings releases and earnings projections and things like that. And then I also, on a daily basis, cover gold, silver, and crude oil and related investments. So,
all right. Well, we'll put a link below to your service there. Now, Erik, when you talk about gold and silver, I know when we first spoke, you had almost had a fundamentalist approach towards your view of gold and silver as sound money, and basically wanting to preach that that narrative. And I think along the way you've learned that sometimes your belief system doesn't jive with the markets. Can you explain what you mean by that?
yeah, you and I were speaking about this, maybe tweeting, I forget. We had a conversation, but someone had posted a chart about Tesla and GDX, and just made a comment about how these positions are just so, these are the troll alert type of comments. If you're ever negative, Tesla or miners or gold, I mean, you're just gonna hear it in spades, from the Twitterverse. But it just got me to thinking, and I know you agree. It's that when people invest to try to save the world, then they basically hold those positions a little too tightly. Maybe like you said earlier, like Gollum. It's their precious. And I'll be honest, and as you alluded to, I've been there, and especially when the people who can influence the markets, push a market in a different direction. I mean, it would be like they stole it from us.
Well, it does seem that if people know that there's manipulation, you do kind of sound like Gollum, because every time the price goes down, you yell manipulation. Oh, that means there's manipulation. Then why are you investing? And that pushes into the concept that people are, in a sense, married to certain positions. And you look at Tesla and you say, how could I ever invest in Tesla? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any money, and yet the price goes higher. So what do you do when you know that things that rub you the wrong way, that aren't correct, and yet you want to make money? What do you advise your subscribers, the people that are following your service? Do you just tell them buy physical metals and wait it out, or what do you actually tell them?
Well, in my mind, I really have a distinction between physical metals and the paper metals, and I think it's reasonable to and even advisable. I don't give financial advice, but what I do is I hold 5 to 10% of my investable assets in physical metals in a vault, and that just, I think, is basically, it's insurance, and it's a store of value. But until that time when what I say in a lot of my articles is just a preamble. You know, I don't know, and I can't predict the day when gold will be set free from its paper chains. But but I'm ready for it.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, you put 10% aside, and you could do the quick math. If stocks drop 50% and you happen to hold them, but then gold goes up 3 or 4, 5 times, you've basically covered your position. But what do you make of the rise of cryptocurrencies in this market and the stayed returns that we're getting, at least the last couple of years? We're moving up a bit in gold and silver. Has that changed your outlook on the value of cryptocurrencies, or do you still just think they're in a bubble?
Well, I mean, I'd love to be convinced to be more comfortable with cryptos, and I've looked at it pretty deeply, and I still have never felt fully comfortable with cryptos. I'm happy for the people that are doing well, because I think we might have a similar mindset. You know, at least the early adopters.
Yes,
I'm sure plenty of people that are current. You know, the next level adopters are just, hey, when
it's going up.
We actually had house guests recently, and the husband's an orthopedic surgeon, very smart people, you know, and the wife's real highly educated people, and she's like, yeah, we bought some Bitcoin. I'm like, that's great, you know.
Yeah, but you're right about the initial adopters.
Super smart people, but I guarantee you that they don't fully understand it. They just know that it went up and it keeps going up, and and honestly, that might be a decent reason to buy it. I mean, it's not what I would do.
Well, there you go. That's my point, is that you see things going up, and if the goal in the market is to make money, if it doesn't fit your criteria, you don't understand it. I mean, Warren Buffett always famously says, I don't invest in anything I don't understand. So he missed the entire .com gains, but then, of course, he never lost any money in .com, and he always invested with the fundamentals. But these bubbles seem to last so long that it's almost like if you can get on and get off in time, you might be okay. But you're right about the cryptos. They were originally designed, and the people that were backing the most, many of them were sound money type people, which I always shook my head at and said, well, that doesn't make any sense. But they thought that they had digital gold on their hands, and they've managed to convince. I saw the CME group came out, and they wrote an article talking about the similarities between gold and Bitcoin, as one being a store of value and the other being a store of value. And what would it take for you to think that somehow that Bitcoin is digital gold? I can't see it as digital gold. Can you ever see it as digital gold or a store of value?
Again, I wish I understood it better. And, I guess what I'm comfortable with philosophically is, again, I don't fully understand all of the, mechanics and the forks and the hashes and all this stuff. And then on a practical basis, I did invest in Ethereum and Litecoin earlier this year, just because I think the concept of the blockchain just makes sense to me. Is just as I think I understand that, right? It's peer-to-peer approval of transaction, like a digital receipt, and that makes sense to me. And you don't need a central hub to clear or to approve. And so that makes sense. The blockchain makes sense to me, and I'm sure I could learn more about it. So I thought, hey, well, Ethereum, hey, this is like, hey, I'd be investing in the backbone of something that could grow into being as ubiquitous as email, for contract approval or for whatever. You would know more about that than me. So I was like, okay, I'll invest in the blockchain. I don't understand the veracity or the essence of the tokens that are changed, but heck, hey, I like this, and I don't need to understand it all, right? So that's why I got in, and then and I think I made 100% in like 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And this was earlier this year, and then it had one of these deep corrections. Everything did, and so I go to Coinbase to sell, and I couldn't get online. You gotta be kidding me.
Oh.
Really? When I want to sell is when they go dark. And really, and again, just understanding how the intermediaries and market makers can, gain an advantage. Well, if the exchange is short, of the tokens, then
you just stop. You just don't allow sales.
It's the plug, man.
Right, right.
You know, because, and again, it's not that, you know, it's not necessarily nefarious. It's just, guess what? These things take time to clear, and so we just got to hit the pause button, so we get everything in and out, so we know where we are, so we're not exposing our shareholders to risk. It's not necessarily nefarious. It's just the way the system is. And I didn't. When that happened, I'm like, you know what? When the stuff hits the fan, I don't want to be in this. You know, so that was, for me, it's more of a practical thing than a philosophical one. I admit I don't fully understand it, and if, I would love to have someone convince me to why Bitcoin is going to 100,000, other than just to say it is.
Right. Well, anybody can make up a.
And it's limited, and anyway. But
yeah, anyone can make up price targets because it doesn't have earnings, so you could just say it is what it is, and it really would be based on supply and demand, because if enough people want it, for whatever reason, there's not that many Bitcoin, so the price could go up. But I think the point you're making is, if you have to study something and do research and understand something, and then get online and get a hardware wallet and make sure your internet connection works and make sure there's electricity and make sure the exchange is working, there's too many ifs there for it to be a store of value. There's nothing to understand about a lump of gold. Once it's dug out of the ground and it's made into a coin, that's it. You don't have to understand. There's nothing to understand. It doesn't require a bunch of different ifs. So that's why I don't see Bitcoin as a store of value. However, Eric, I do think, because of the ethereal nature of cryptocurrencies, and because there are so many people that believe in this, that it can go higher in fiat prices, just because there's a generation younger than us that believes everything digital, and they actually believe that a physical asset is a liability. It's hard to understand that, but they grew up with, they didn't have record albums or even CDs. Their music is all digital, so they see value in what I would think are digital extractions, but they see this as some type of digital genius, I suppose.
Makes sense.
What's that?
Yeah, that makes sense. As far as supply and demand for digital tokens, that's probably a decent case.
Yeah, and I think what we look at, perhaps our initial reaction is demand for what? What am I going to do with it? That's what Peter Schiff is always saying. What are you going to do with a Bitcoin? And I think that misses the point, because that's what older people think. And I'm one of them. You say, well, it has no intrinsic value. The digital mind works differently. Now, you could say, I don't believe in the digital world. Well, unfortunately, that's the one we live in. So it kind of does behoove us to understand this type of digital, what we may call an abstraction, but it actually becomes real, because were you able to get your sales through Coinbase, you could have purchased hard assets with them. So the profits are real. It's not like you're just chasing digital numbers. I mean, you could buy real estate with the profits that you make from. You could buy a car with the profits that you make from cryptocurrencies. But you also follow the gold miners, and I am perplexed that they have seemed to have lately, the last year or so, no correlation that I can see between the gold and silver prices and the mining price. Can you take a shot at explaining what's going on with these miners?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the miners. I look at the and there are people that understand the economics of mining better than me, and so I just look at the ETFs, the GDX and GDXJ, as kind of just proxies for the industry. So there still is correlation. But I think there's been a little bit of divergence in some periods. I mean, GDXJ, of course, had its issue with having to recast its population, and that may have created some downward pressure as the uncertainty grows. I guess I could even run a number real quick and so what has been the correlation? It probably still is still is valid. So I guess I don't agree with the premise of your question. Is that I think there is still this correlation. It may be at least lower than it has been in the past.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing, Eric, is that even when the metals prices rise, it used to be a couple of years ago when we saw in 2016, the first half of the year, the metals rose and the mining shares rose even more. And now that the metal prices, they're not much lower than they were when we were at 1300, 1320 in March of 2016, the mining shares have been decimated since then. So they just went down, and they haven't rebounded in the same way that the gold and silver prices have.
Yeah, I don't know if you can put a photo in your or a link. I could actually link a chart to underneath your thing people can look at. But
yeah, we'll do that. Please do that. I can figure that out.
Yeah, over the last month, I'll email you the link. Over the last month, gold and GDX have 94% correlation. Over the last quarter, 63 trading days, 93% correlation. Over the last year, 252 trading days, 70% correlation. So there's still correlation defined as, mathematically. Now, the miners are lagging a little bit, even though on a daily basis or a weekly, whatever, still correlation that when one goes up, the other goes up, so forth. But the miners are lagging a little bit in value.
Yeah, because normally you expect with a miner, at least my perspective is, that if gold goes up a certain percentage, then the miners would go up a certain percentage plus. You'd get a premium. And the idea is that if you want to leverage your precious metal investment, you buy miners. And that's turned out to be your negative leverage because they're not doing as well as the precious metals. Now, let's move on to geopolitics and how that impacts everything. So when Donald Trump came to office, just before he got elected, the idea was he would be an utter disaster for the markets and that gold and silver would rocket on the idea of uncertainty and so on. And we haven't seen that. Do you expect there to be any change in the perspective of what a Trump presidency means? Do you think we'll get the tax relief? We'll get Obamacare taken away? We'll get infrastructure? We'll get a wall? Do you think any of those Trumpflation type promises are going to happen? And if so, what will that do for the stock market and precious metals?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this area either. I do have opinions, though.
Well, that's what we're here for. This is Smaulgld subscribers sound off. No one's pretending to be an expert, not myself, not you. So let's just hash it out.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I think that I'm not ashamed to say I voted for Trump, and I did so because of the promise to drain the swamp, and that in my view is the most important thing that any politician can do, Republican or Democrat. And I guess you could define the swamp, different ways. Yeah. But because I do see the Republicans and Democrats as two wings of the same bird. So I don't, and I think we are in some ways getting more of the same. And kind of the narrative is basically everything is awesome. That's basically the narrative.
Right, but excuse me, if more of the same would mean we don't get tax relief, we don't get rid of Obamacare, we don't build the wall, we don't do any of those Trumpflation things. Do you think we're going to get more of the same, meaning Republicans and Democrats are not going to join together and push forward the Trump agenda?
So I think what's happening, what you see now, the headlines of people being indicted that were close to the Democratic campaign. This is really big stuff, and I think so. For me, the jury's kind of out. I mean, if and I certainly don't think the swamp was only one party. I think it's our system. But if things happen that really prove there is change, then I'm not sure what can happen. I think that it'd be easy to be convinced that the narrative is working. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We're bringing, building factories, and guess what? I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it too little, too late with 20 trillion in debt? And maybe. But I think that I think the party will keep going as long as it goes, and how long does that last? I really have no idea. And that's why for me, the way I invest is, I have a pretty short time horizon. I think day trading is a bad idea, and I don't do that. But I have a short time horizon on my trades and my investments. So I don't have I don't have a 3-year plan, a 3-year holding period for things based upon Trump agenda or not a Trump agenda. I have a short time frame because I really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we could be at war with North Korea next week. I think the stuff that's happening in Saudi Arabia seems to imply that we more likely that we go to war in Iran, and that what comes from all that, I don't know.
So you basically drive as you go, as you drive, you look at the things on the road, and you drive accordingly. You're ever vigilant, but you don't have a thesis that something's going to happen within the next 6, 3, 4 months. See, some people are investing with the idea that there's a collapse imminent. Some people are invested in there's going to be infrastructure spending. Some people are invested in the concept that the Fed's going to raise hike 4 times. They're not going to raise hikes, or they're going to do QE. I agree with you. I can't imagine for sure that someone can say that the Fed is going to do this for sure, or they're not going to do this, or this is going to pass Congress, or it's not going to pass Congress. So I guess you do have to play it by ear. But what do you make of what the Fed's been doing? Do you think Powell will be any different if he does get nominated officially and approved as the Fed chairman? Any different than Jenny Yellen?
No, I think the narrative will be, everything is awesome, and to the extent that and I'm not saying it isn't, right? I
but
think,
what are you saying? What do you think the state of the economy is?
I think that the economy is at risk, and it's been at risk since 2008.
But is the underlying economy any good?
It's hard for me to say. I think they tell us it is. It's sluggish but good, right?
Yeah, well, that's what the GDP reflects.
It's Goldilocks. It's the Goldilocks economy, right? So everything is awesome, and it's just right. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. So I don't have a long-term thesis, and I think that our government is going to continue to reinforce that narrative, the Goldilocks narrative.
So basically, you're following as you go along, but you have the precious metals as the insurance in case something happens that you're not aware of or not projecting, or you actually are projecting because you just never know. That's what insurance is for. If you could predict that when your house is going to burn down and you see it's not going to burn down for 10 years,
yep.
Well, then you don't buy insurance because you know that because you're able to predict it. But you can't predict that, and that's why you buy insurance.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this before. I think that's a great point. I mean, I don't, if let's just say that this narrative, jobs, and bring it back, and that they tweak things just right, and we have 5 to 10 years of growth, and we actually are really able to grow out of, and start chinking away at the debt. Is that possible? Probably. Yeah, I think it's possible. Is it likely? Probably not, but that could happen, right? I mean,
it could happen that you might be able to reduce the deficit, not 20 trillion, but I think they're planning on just boosting the stock market, and hopefully that creates greater tax revenue. I don't know, because there is a big difference between the economy and the stock market. The stock market's booming all-time highs, and there's no way that the U.S. economy is operating at the best capacity it's ever been at. So I think what I think is going to happen, Eric, is the stock market continues to grind higher, and the regular economy continues to grind a lot slower, and that just creates what they call wealth disparity, because people with assets see them appreciate, and people with small piles of savings see them diminish as they have to spend them, and especially bad for retirees. And I think a retiree has to seriously consider speculative assets or increasing their income, because they're not going to be able to live off of Social Security or a small pile of savings. And that's how they force you into the stock market. I mean, I saw someone on my channel, I think the person thought it was a male or a woman, I don't remember. She was saying, you know, I think it was a she. I don't really know, but what are some of the better cryptocurrencies? I need to get some income. I was like, whoa, you shouldn't be. You know, that's a young person. That's a speculation. That's not something you should be messing your retirement money around with. But that's where we are today.
Yeah, I was going to latch on your concept of insurance for a second too, because I, you know, like I said, I mean, the economy could continue, and I agree with everything you said. You said that very eloquently about the real economy and so forth. But there was a time early in my conversion to sound money that it's almost like in the back of your mind you're thinking you almost want to collapse. You know, you almost, because I was sold, you get sold, you know, to the concept of precious metals based on the dollar collapse,
right?
Gold exchange. All these narratives that support it, and they, you know, they may all be. There's an element of truth to all of them, actually. Correct. But so you get sold on this, and so kind of the back of your mind, you know, as you've said many times, you know, we look for Russia to be our savior, or China to be our savior, or you know, the dollar collapse to be our savior. I mean, are you kidding me? Do you really want, because you have, you know, precious metals, you want us to go into a depression? I mean. Well, you know, no, I don't anymore. You know, I don't want to. You know, who wants that?
Well, that's like saying I have insurance. I hope my house burns down.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you're not going to be better off. I always look at, you know, the people that own cryptocurrencies or gold, whatever they thought protected themselves in Venezuela. Do you think they're happy now that their country is an entire mess? And they would have been better off if the country hadn't collapsed.
You know, in Venezuela, your stocks, everything's up in value in terms of bolivars, but you can't eat. So,
yeah, it's not a good situation. See, that's why I think you don't get into precious metals for price appreciation. You want price appreciation. This is what I was talking about, the miners. That's where you might be able to make a premium on whatever price appreciation you have against fiat, but. Definitely, I don't think precious metals are something that you should hope to get rich on. Eric, before we go, tell our listeners, it's the exact link, and I'll put it below where they can find you on Seeking Alpha.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Well, tell our listeners, because some people don't even look. They only listen, and they just remember, and they go and type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Seeking Alpha and Viking Analytics. If you just look in the search bar for Viking Analytics, then
all right. So Viking Analytics, Eric the Red, thank you very much for being on the Smaulgld Subscriber Sound Off series. And we'll have you back again soon. Thanks a lot.
Take care.